Professor Dalthier adjusted his reading lenses and watched the amphitheater fill with students from 40 different worlds. His scales gleamed under the soft lighting as he prepared his most popular lecture of the semester. For 200 years, he had taught ancient Earth studies at the Celestial Archive Academy, and his specialty remained the most fascinating subject of all: humanity's primitive mythology. The students settled into their seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of species across the curved rows. Olivia Reed chose a spot near the middle, her plain human appearance drawing curious glances from her classmates. She was the first human ever accepted into the Academy's prestigious xenoanthropology program, and everyone wanted to see if she could keep up with beings whose civilizations had mastered space travel, while her ancestors were still banging rocks together. "Welcome to comparative mythology," Professor Dalthier began, his voice carrying easily through the acoustic design. "Today we examine one of the most entertaining aspects of primitive human culture, their invention of fictional deities to explain natural phenomena they could not understand." He pulled up a holographic image that rotated slowly above his desk. The figure showed a muscular man with long blonde hair, holding a hammer, lightning crackling around him. "This is Thor," the professor continued, his tone mixing amusement with academic interest. "Created by the Norse peoples of Northern Europe approximately 3,000 Earth years ago. According to their mythology, this imaginary being controlled thunder and lightning. Of course, we now understand they simply lacked the scientific knowledge to comprehend atmospheric electrical discharge." A few students chittered with laughter. Simon, an avian student from the Kepler colonies, raised one wing. "Professor, did they actually believe these stories were real?" "Oh yes," Dalthier said, nodding sagely. "The human brain, while impressive for its time, was prone to pattern-seeking behavior. When they saw lightning, they invented a god. When they saw the ocean, they invented Poseidon. When they saw love, they invented Aphrodite. It was quite systematic, really. Every phenomenon they feared or failed to understand became personified as a deity." Olivia's hand went up slowly. Professor Dalthier noticed her and gestured with one clawed hand. "Yes, Miss Reed?" "Do you have a question?" "That's not really accurate," Olivia said carefully. Her voice was polite but firm. "Thor isn't a myth. He's my uncle." The lecture hall went silent. Professor Dalthier blinked both sets of his eyelids in confusion. Several students turned to stare at the human girl, wondering if translation errors were causing problems. "I'm sorry," the professor said. "Perhaps you misunderstand the term mythology. These are fictional stories your ancestors created." "No, I understand," Olivia interrupted gently. "I'm saying Thor is real. He's my great-great-great-uncle on my mother's side. Well, technically he's more distant than that, but we just call him Uncle Thor at family reunions. He lives in Oslo now, works as an electrician." Professor Dalthier's tail twitched, a sign of irritation among his species. "Miss Reed, I appreciate that human culture sometimes struggles with distinguishing fantasy from reality, but this is an academic institution. We deal in facts, not—" "I have pictures," Olivia said. She pulled out her datapad and tapped the screen a few times. "This is from last summer. That's Uncle Thor on the left with the hammer. That's my mom. That's me. We were celebrating my cousin's graduation." She held up the datapad. The holographic image projected larger, showing a group of humans at what appeared to be an outdoor gathering. On the left stood a massive man, easily 7 feet tall, with long blonde hair and a braided beard. He wore a casual shirt that strained against muscles that looked like they could bend steel. In his hand he held a hammer that seemed to hum with barely contained energy. He was laughing, one arm around a normal-looking woman, while Olivia stood on his other side making a silly face at the camera. The resemblance to the mythological depictions was impossible to ignore. "This is clearly fabricated," Professor Dalthier said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Digital manipulation is a simple matter. You can run authenticity scans," Olivia offered. "The image is genuine. I've got about 50 more from different family events. Uncle Thor comes to everything. He's really nice, actually. Tells terrible dad jokes. Last year he brought this meat he made himself, and my Aunt Sif had to cut him off because he kept challenging people to arm wrestling matches." Simon leaned forward, his head feathers rising with interest. "Wait, you're seriously claiming that the thunder god from human mythology is your actual relative? And he's an electrician?" "Makes sense when you think about it," Olivia said with a shrug. He's always been good with electricity. Might as well use it professionally. He says the modern safety regulations are annoying, but he likes helping people get their power back on after storms. Instructor Morel, a crystalline being who assisted with the class, moved closer to examine the image. Her faceted body refracted light in patterns that indicated deep concentration. Professor, the electromagnetic signature around the hammer in this image is unusual. It reads as genuine energy emission, not digital effects. Professor Dalthier felt his carefully constructed worldview beginning to crack. He had published 17 books on human mythology. He was considered the galaxy's foremost expert on why humans had invented gods to cope with their primitive existence. His last paper, The Psychological Need for Fictional Deities in Pre-Space Societies, had won the Arcturus Prize. And now this human girl was telling him it was all wrong. "Class dismissed," he said abruptly. "Miss Reed, please remain behind. We need to discuss this further." As the other students filed out, buzzing with excited speculation, Olivia stayed in her seat. She looked worried now, probably realizing she had just upended her professor's entire career. Professor Dalthier descended from his podium and approached her carefully. "Miss Reed," he said slowly, "are you telling me that humanity has been letting the entire galaxy believe your gods were mythology when they were actually real beings?" Olivia bit her lip. "Well, nobody ever asked? And you all seemed so sure they were myths. We figured you knew and were just being polite. Plus, most of them prefer privacy these days. Uncle Thor says the old worshipping stuff made him uncomfortable. He just wants to live his life, you know." The professor sat down heavily in a student seat, his tail drooping. 2 centuries of research, 2 centuries of absolutely certain knowledge, all contradicted by a girl with family photos. "I think," he said faintly, "I need to make some calls." Dr. Nometh's compound eyes scanned every face in the emergency faculty meeting, with the intensity of someone watching their career collapse in real time. The insectoid administrator had called together every professor in the Ancient Earth Studies department, along with the dean and several psychologists. They filled the conference room to capacity, a mix of species united by one common concern. The human student might be delusional, or worse, telling the truth. "Let me understand this correctly," Dr. Nometh said, his mandibles clicking with agitation. "Miss Reed claims that Thor, the Norse deity we have studied for 3 centuries as a prime example of primitive mythmaking, is her actual uncle who works in electrical maintenance?" "That's what she said," Professor Dalthier confirmed. He looked exhausted, his scales duller than usual. He had not slept since the lecture yesterday. "This is clearly a psychological episode," Dr. Nometh continued, turning to the medical staff. "Humans are known for their creative imaginations. Perhaps the stress of being the first of her kind at this institution has caused a break from reality. We should arrange counseling and possibly contact her family." "I can hear you," Olivia said from her seat near the door. She had been asked to attend the meeting, though most of the faculty seemed to be discussing her rather than with her. "And I'm fine, thanks. I know it sounds weird, but it's true." Ruth, Olivia's roommate, sat beside her in a mobile water tank. The aquatic being had her tentacles pressed against the glass in what Olivia had learned was a gesture of support. Ruth had spent half the night listening to Olivia's stories about family gatherings that included beings from every pantheon on Earth. "Miss Reed," Dr. Nometh said with exaggerated patience, "do you understand how this sounds? You're asking us to believe that beings we have categorized, studied, and published countless papers about are not only real but actively living on Earth in ordinary occupations." "Yes," Olivia said simply, "because that's what's happening. Look, I get why you didn't know. They keep low profiles, but I can prove it if you let me." "Prove it how?" demanded Professor Helmsworth, a gaseous entity who taught early human civilization. "Edited photos prove nothing. Humans have been digitally manipulating images since the 21st century. Olivia pulled out her datapad again. "Okay, let me call my mom. She's at work right now, but she'll answer." She tapped the screen and waited. The holographic projection showed a woman with Olivia's same brown hair and tired eyes appearing in the air above the table. She wore a lab coat and sat in what looked like an office. "Liv, honey, I'm in the middle of a meeting," her mother said with the distracted tone of a busy parent. "Is everything okay?" "Hi, Mom. Sorry to interrupt. I'm in a faculty meeting here at the academy. There's been a situation." Her mother's expression shifted to concern. What kind of situation? Did something happen? I kind of told my mythology professor that Uncle Thor is real and now nobody believes me. Can you help explain? Dr. Evelyn Reed's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, understanding, resignation, and finally amusement. Oh, Liv, I told you to be careful about that. The galactic community has very fixed ideas about Earth's history. Wait, Dr. Nometh interrupted, moving closer to the projection. You are Olivia's mother? Yes, Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm a xenoanthropologist at the University of Geneva. I actually know some of your work. Dr. Nometh, your paper on cultural evolution in oxygen-breathing species was fascinating. The administrator's mandibles clicked in pleased surprise before he remembered the situation. Dr. Reed, your daughter is making extraordinary claims about the nature of Earth's mythological figures. They're not mythological, Evelyn said gently. They're real. Thor is indeed my uncle, several times removed. He'll be at Thanksgiving next month if you'd like to meet him. Aunt Athena sends her regards, by the way. She's teaching classical warfare strategy at Cambridge now. Got her doctorate last year. Very proud of her. The room erupted. Every faculty member tried to speak at once, their voices and communication methods creating a chaos of sound and light. Professor Delthier raised his voice above the din. Dr. Reed, are you seriously confirming that the goddess of wisdom from Greek mythology is a real person with a doctorate teaching at a human university? Well, yes, Evelyn said, looking confused by the confusion. Why wouldn't she be? Aunt Athena has always loved teaching. She did it in ancient Greece too, though back then they made a bigger fuss about it. She prefers the modern academic system. Better research grants, she says. Dr. Nometh made a sound like air escaping from a punctured balloon. Dr. Reed, if this is true, why has Earth never mentioned this to the galactic community? We have diplomatic relations. We share information. Why would you hide the existence of beings with supernatural abilities? We didn't hide anything, Evelyn said, frowning. You classified them as mythology. We assumed you knew they were real and were using mythology as a polite academic term. Like how we say alternative theories when we mean someone is wrong but we don't want to be rude about it. The silence that followed was profound. Ruth made a bubbling sound that might have been laughter. Olivia tried not to smile. Professor Helmsworth finally spoke. You thought we knew they were real? Well, yes, Evelyn said. I mean, there are records, photos. Some of them have social media accounts. Uncle Loki has a YouTube channel where he does pranks. It has 3 million subscribers. We figured you did basic research before writing all those papers about them being fictional. Professor Dalthier put his head in his hands. Literally every paper he had ever written was based on the assumption that these beings were invented by primitive humans. He had built an entire theoretical framework about why humans needed to create gods, and apparently humans had not created them at all. Can you provide evidence? Dr. Nometh asked, his voice strained. Verifiable scientific evidence that these beings exist and possess the abilities attributed to them? Sure, Evelyn said. What do you need? DNA samples? Historical photographs? Video documentation? We have family trees going back thousands of years. Uncle Thor's hammer is registered with the International Supernatural Artifacts Commission. I can send you the paperwork if you want. The what commission? Someone whispered. Oh, right, you probably don't know about that either, Evelyn continued. There's a whole branch of Earth government that handles registration and monitoring of unusual abilities and artifacts. It's been around since the 1950s, helps prevent accidents. You'd be surprised how many insurance claims involve accidentally awakened ancient powers. Olivia pulled up files on her datapad and sent them to the room's main display. Personnel records appeared, showing identification documents for beings with names like Thor Odinson, Athena Olympus, Bridget Kildare, and dozens more. Each had mundane occupations listed: electrician, professor, firefighter, postal worker, storyteller, baker. The DNA analyses showed they were genetically human, but with unusual markers that the Academy's scientists had never seen before. The historical photographs went back centuries, showing the same faces in different eras, wearing different clothes but always clearly recognizable. This is impossible, Professor Helmsworth breathed. The implications are staggering. If these beings are real, then our entire understanding of human cultural development is wrong. Not wrong, Olivia said quietly. Just incomplete. You studied the myths. You just didn't realize the myths were based on real people who didn't die like normal humans do. Dr. Nometh sat down slowly, his exoskeleton creaking. Miss Reed, Dr. Reed, I think we need to arrange a much longer meeting. Possibly several meetings. Dean Porthos will need to be informed. The Board of Academics will have questions, and I suspect we will need to begin retracting papers immediately. I have a better idea, Evelyn said from the projection. Why don't I arrange for some family members to visit? Seeing is believing, after all. Uncle Thor loves traveling, and I'm sure Aunt Athena would enjoy giving a guest lecture. Would that help? Every head in the room turned to stare at Olivia, who shrugged. Family visits happen. Might as well make it educational. Professor Dalthier laughed suddenly, a harsh sound that contained more despair than humor. Educational. Yes. We're about to be educated on how completely wrong we've been for 300 years. Ruth pressed her tentacles against the glass again, and Olivia reached out to touch the tank in response. At least someone believed her from the start. The meeting continued for 4 more hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Either Earth had orchestrated the most elaborate hoax in galactic history, or the Academy's most prestigious department had been studying real people while insisting they were imaginary. Given the evidence, the second option seemed more likely, and much more embarrassing. The transport ship descended toward the Academy's landing pad with none of the usual diplomatic fanfare. Olivia stood at the edge of the platform, trying not to laugh at the scene behind her. Every major professor from the Earth Studies department had gathered, along with medical staff, security personnel, and what looked like half the student body. They had set up monitoring equipment that would have been appropriate for detecting a bomb, not greeting her uncle. Dr. Nometh paced near the equipment banks, his antennae twitching nervously. Miss Reed, are you absolutely certain your uncle agreed to this examination? We will need to run extensive tests, DNA analysis, neurological scans, demonstrations of claimed abilities in controlled conditions. I told him you wanted to meet him, Olivia said. He thought it was funny, said he hasn't been studied this thoroughly since the Viking Age, and back then the methodology was just throw rocks at him and see what happens. The ship's door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Olivia broke into a genuine smile as a massive figure ducked through the doorway and stepped onto the platform. Thor looked exactly like he did in every family photo. 7 feet of solid muscle, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, beard braided with small silver rings. He wore jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Electricians do it until the lights come on." He carried his hammer casually over one shoulder. "Liv," he boomed, his voice carrying across the entire landing area. He set down the hammer and swept her up in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "Look at you. Your mom said you were doing great here, but I had to see for myself. You eating enough? You look thin." "I'm fine, Uncle Thor," Olivia laughed, hugging him back. "Thanks for coming. Are you kidding? A chance to visit an alien planet and mess with some professors? This is the most fun I've had since that thing in Berlin." He set her down and looked around at the assembled crowd, his blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "So which ones thought I was made up?" "Most of them," Olivia admitted. "This is Professor Dalthier. He wrote 17 books about you." Thor walked over to the reptilian professor and extended a hand that could crush stone. "Nice to meet you. I hope they were good books. I haven't read them, but if you need me to sign copies or something, I'm happy to help." Professor Dalthier shook the offered hand carefully, his scales showing colors associated with extreme confusion. "You're real," he said faintly. "Last time I checked," Thor agreed. "Though I did have a weird day in the 14th century where I wasn't sure, but that turned out to be bad mead. Now Liv said you folks wanted some kind of demonstration? Fair warning, I'm not great with formal presentations. I'm more of a hands-on guy." Dr. Nometh approached with a medical scanner already active. "Mr. Thor, we would like to conduct several tests to verify your nature and abilities. Would you consent to a full physical examination?" "Sure, but just call me Thor. The Mister makes me feel old." He paused. "I mean, I am old, but I don't like feeling it. And yeah, scan away. I've got nothing to hide. Well, except that thing in Tokyo. But we agreed never to speak of that." The medical team swarmed forward with their equipment. Thor stood patiently while they took readings that made their instruments flash and beep in confused patterns. Liam, a silicon-based student who had befriended Olivia, moved closer to read the results over the technician's shoulders. His cellular structure is human, one technician reported, but the energy readings are off the scale. There's some kind of power source integrated into his biology that I've never seen before. That'd be the God part, Thor said helpfully. It's complicated. My dad tried to explain it once, but honestly I stopped paying attention after the first hour. Something about dimensional energy and being anchored to fundamental forces. I just know it means I don't age much and I can do the lightning thing. The lightning thing, Professor Dalthier repeated. Could you demonstrate? Thor shrugged. Sure, probably shouldn't do it inside though. Where's your courtyard? They moved as a group to the Academy's central courtyard, a large open space normally used for ceremonies. Students hung from windows and balconies, everyone wanting to see if the impossible was really happening. Thor walked to the center of the courtyard and looked up at the clear sky. Okay, so normally I wouldn't just summon a storm for fun. It messes with weather patterns and the meteorologists get cranky. But since this is a demonstration, he held up his hand and called out something in a language that made Olivia's teeth ache. The hammer, which he had set down nearby, flew into his grip like it was magnetized to his palm. The sky darkened. Clouds formed from nothing, swirling into existence with unnatural speed. Wind picked up, whipping across the courtyard. The monitoring equipment screamed with alerts as energy levels spiked beyond what should be possible. Thor raised the hammer. Lightning answered. Brilliant forks of electricity that danced between the clouds and the metal head of his weapon. He brought the hammer down in a controlled motion, and a single bolt struck the ground 10 feet away, leaving a scorched circle but harming nothing else. The thunder that followed rattled windows. Then he waved his hand and the storm dissipated as quickly as it had formed, the sky returning to its previous clear state. There you go, he said, slightly out of breath. Usually I make it rain too, but I didn't want to ruin anyone's day. The weather control takes more effort than people think. It's not just about throwing lightning around. You have to consider air pressure, temperature gradients, humidity levels. It's basically applied meteorology at speed. The silence lasted for approximately 5 seconds before everyone started talking at once. Liam pushed his way through to Olivia. That was incredible. The energy manipulation alone would require technology we don't have. How is he doing that with just his body? Born that way, Olivia said. Well, kind of. The full story takes a while, and it involves some stuff about different pantheons having different power sources. Uncle Thor's family is tied to natural forces. Aunt Athena's side works differently. It's a whole thing. Dr. Nometh approached Thor carefully, his earlier skepticism replaced with scientific fascination tinged with fear. Mr. Thor, could you explain how you accomplished that? The energy required to generate a localized weather system should be beyond any biological organism. Like I said, complicated. Thor replied. He had pulled out a water bottle from somewhere and was drinking deeply. The simple version is I'm connected to the concept of storms at a level that's more metaphysical than physical. I don't generate the energy so much as channel it from somewhere else. Honestly, I stopped trying to understand the details centuries ago. I just know it works. Professor Dalthier had his datapad out, recording frantically. In my research, I theorized that the Norse peoples invented you as a personification of their fear and fascination with storms. I wrote an entire chapter on the psychological necessity of making me up. Thor finished. Yeah, that makes sense from the outside, but really they worshipped me because I was there, making sure their crops got rain and their enemies got lightning bolts to the face. It was a transactional relationship. They gave me offerings, I gave them decent weather. Worked pretty well until Christianity showed up and complicated things. But where did you come from? Liam asked. How did beings like you begin to exist? Thor scratched his beard thoughtfully. Now that's a question I actually don't know the full answer to. My dad might, but he's cryptic about it. Best guess? We're what happens when the universe gets weird in localized areas. Right place, right time, right conditions, and boom. You get something that doesn't quite follow normal rules. Mutation taken to an extreme, maybe. Or maybe we were always here and humans just noticed us first. Origin stories get murky when you're dealing with beings who predate written history. A small voice came from the crowd of students. Is Loki real too? Thor's expression shifted to fond exasperation. Unfortunately, yes. He's my brother. Well, adopted brother, kind of. Norse family trees are messy. He's currently living in Portland, doing stand-up comedy. He's actually pretty good at it, though his material is sometimes too weird for normal audiences. Last time I saw him, he was working on a bit about the time he turned into a horse. That actually happened, by the way. We don't talk about it at family gatherings. This is impossible, someone muttered, but without much conviction. No, Professor Dalthier said slowly, his eyes fixed on his datapad where he was reviewing centuries of research. It's just improbable. We confused mythology with fiction because we couldn't imagine beings like this existing outside of stories. We made an assumption based on our own limitations. Thor nodded approvingly. That's pretty wise. You know, if you want to actually understand this stuff, you should come visit Earth. Meet more of the family. My daughter would probably talk to you for hours about the physics of dimensional energy. She's got degrees in both mythology and quantum mechanics. Says they're basically the same thing. Dr. Nometh's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of a mind working at full speed. Would others be willing to submit to study? This changes everything we know about biological possibilities, cultural development, the nature of consciousness itself. You'd have to ask them individually, Thor said. Most of us prefer quiet lives these days. The worship thing got old after a few centuries. But for academic purposes, I bet a few would be interested. Aunt Bridget loves teaching. Cousin Anansi never shuts up anyway. Great-grandma Baba Yaga, he paused. Actually, maybe not her. She's cranky and the house would freak people out. Olivia touched his arm. The house? Long story, Thor said quickly. Anyway, I should probably get going soon. I've got a job in Oslo tomorrow morning. Power grid maintenance, but I'm glad I could help clear things up. He looked at Professor Dalthier specifically. For what it's worth, your books weren't bad. You got a lot of the personality stuff right, even if you thought I was imaginary. The chapter about my relationship with Thunder was actually pretty insightful. The professor looked like he didn't know whether to be insulted or flattered. Thank you. Anytime. Thor hugged Olivia goodbye, promised to tell her mother she was doing great, and headed back to his ship. The crowd parted silently as he passed, everyone staring at the walking impossibility. As the ship lifted off, Liam turned to Olivia. You grew up with this? With gods at family reunions? They're not gods, Olivia said tiredly. They're family. Weird, powerful, sometimes annoying family. Uncle Thor always hogs the bathroom. And don't get me started on what holidays are like when you have relatives from multiple pantheons arguing about whose traditions to follow. I think, Professor Dalthier said softly, we need to rewrite every textbook in this department. Dean Porthos existed as pure energy contained within a specialized field generator, which meant he had no physical tells when stressed. However, the way his containment field flickered and shifted colors made his current emotional state very clear to everyone in the administrative conference room. 40% of the Academy's ancient Earth Studies curriculum had just been revealed as fundamentally flawed, and the academic world was circling like predators scenting blood. The University of Andromeda is already preparing papers questioning our credibility, Dean Porthos said, his voice resonating from speakers built into his containment unit. The Institute of Comparative Xenology has formally requested we retract every publication related to Earth mythology. We have 300 years of research that is now suspect. How do we address this? Professor Dalthier sat with his tail coiled tightly around his chair, a posture of defensive stress. Around the table, every department head looked similarly uncomfortable. Instructor Morell's crystalline structure was dim, reflecting her mood. Even the tenured professors who normally radiated confidence seemed diminished. We acknowledge the error and move forward, Professor Dalthier said. What else can we do? We made assumptions based on incomplete data. It happens in science. Not on this scale, muttered Professor Helmsworth. This isn't a small correction. This is discovering that an entire branch of study was built on a misunderstanding. Olivia sat at the far end of the table, technically present as a student representative but mostly trying to be invisible. Ruth had offered to come for moral support, but Olivia had declined. This was bad enough without witnesses. Miss Reed, Dean Porthos said, his attention focusing on her in a way that made the air feel heavy. You mentioned you could arrange introductions to other members of your extended family. Was that offer genuine? Yes, Olivia said carefully. I mean, I'd have to ask them first. They're all busy with their own lives, but I think some would be interested in helping. They're not trying to be mysterious or anything. They just didn't know anyone wanted to talk to them. The irony, Professor Dalthier said bitterly, is that we wrote papers about why these beings don't exist while they were living normal lives on Earth. Probably reading our papers and laughing. Uncle Loki definitely laughed, Olivia admitted. He sent me a link to one of your papers about him being a trickster archetype, representing human fears of chaos. He thought it was hilarious. He commented that if you had just asked, he could have told you he represents being bored easily and having poor impulse control. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound, Dean Porthos laughing. It emerged from his speakers as a strange harmonic resonance, but it was definitely laughter. Poor impulse control. Yes, that does track with the mythological accounts more accurately than deep psychological archetypes. This is a disaster, Professor Helmsworth insisted. How do we explain to the academic community that we were wrong about something this fundamental? We tell the truth, Olivia said. Everyone turned to look at her. She swallowed nervously but continued. You tell them that you studied Earth's cultural records and made logical conclusions based on the information available. You weren't wrong to think they were myths. Most civilizations do create mythologies. You just happened to study the one planet where some of the myths were based on real beings who lived long enough to be remembered. The other universities won't see it that way, Instructor Morell said, her voice chiming like distant bells. They will see it as incompetence. Let them, Dean Porthos said suddenly. Miss Reed is correct. We made reasonable assumptions. But now we have an opportunity that no other institution possesses. We have direct access to the primary sources. We can conduct the first genuine studies of these beings. If we move quickly and adapt our curriculum, we can transform this embarrassment into the most significant research opportunity in modern xenoanthropology. Professor Dalthier's tail uncoiled slightly. You want to rebuild the department around studying living subjects instead of mythology? I want to rebuild it around truth, the dean clarified. Yes, we were wrong, but we can be the first to be right. Miss Reed, could you help us develop a new curriculum, one based on actual interviews and studies rather than archaeological conjecture? Olivia felt her stomach twist with anxiety. I'm just a first-year student. I don't know if I'm qualified to. You're the only human here, Dean Porthos interrupted gently. You're the only one who grew up knowing these beings existed. You're the only one they might trust enough to facilitate introductions. I'm not asking you to write the curriculum yourself. I'm asking you to be a bridge. My mom might be better at that, Olivia suggested. She's an actual expert. She works with the International Supernatural Artifacts Commission. The what? Several voices asked simultaneously. Olivia pulled up files on her datapad. It's a branch of Earth's government that monitors and registers people with unusual abilities and artifacts with special properties. It's been around since the mid-20th century. They help prevent accidents and provide resources for people who need them. My mom works in their research division. Professor Dalthier leaned forward eagerly. Does this commission have records we could access? Historical data? Medical studies? Probably. I'd have to ask. A lot of it might be classified, but for academic research they might share some information. They're mostly concerned with safety and privacy, not secrecy. The people registered with them just want to live normal lives without being hassled. This is perfect, Dean Porthos said, his energy field brightening with excitement. We can approach this systematically. Miss Reed, would you be willing to contact your mother and ask about potential collaboration? In the meantime, we need to address the immediate crisis. Over the next hour, they developed a plan. The department would issue a formal acknowledgement that previous research had been based on incomplete information. They would announce a major curriculum revision to incorporate new findings. Most importantly, they would position the Academy as the leading institution for studying Earth's unique biological and cultural situation. Simon burst into the meeting without knocking. His feathers ruffled with agitation. Professors, you need to see this. The news feeds are going crazy. He pulled up a holographic display. Headlines from across the galaxy scrolled past. Prestigious Academy admits 3 centuries of errors. Earth's gods real, Academy says. Mythology department faces existential crisis. The rival universities are having a field day, Simon continued. The University of Andromeda just announced they always suspected Earth's accounts were more complex than the Academy suggested. They're claiming academic superiority. They're lying, Professor Helmsworth said flatly. They used our research as their foundation. If we're wrong, they're wrong. Doesn't matter, Dean Porthos said. Perception shapes reputation. We need to act decisively. He turned to Olivia. Miss Reed, how quickly could your family members visit? Multiple individuals, if possible. We need to demonstrate that we have unprecedented access to primary sources. Olivia checked her datapad, scrolling through contacts. Let me make some calls. Aunt Bridget teaches firefighting in Dublin. She loves education. Cousin Anansi is a storytelling professor in Accra. He literally cannot resist an audience. Uncle Thoth runs a library in Cairo. He's obsessed with preserving knowledge. They might come if I explain the situation. Do it, the dean said. Tell them we need their help to correct centuries of misunderstanding. Appeal to their desire for truth to be known. Olivia stepped out of the conference room and started making calls. By the time she returned an hour later, she had commitments from 5 different relatives, all of whom were fascinated by the idea of teaching alien academics about their real lives versus their mythological representations. Aunt Bridget can come next week, Olivia reported. She says she'll bring her fire safety demonstration. Uncle Thoth needs 2 weeks' notice, but he's excited. He's bringing original manuscripts that predate what you have in the archives. Cousin Anansi will come whenever he cleared his schedule. Uncle Hermes said he could drop by between deliveries. He runs a courier service and he's very fast. And Great Aunt Bastet is interested, but she says if anyone tries to make her do tricks like a normal cat, she'll curse them. She can turn into a cat? Liam asked. He had followed Simon into the meeting and was now leaning against the wall, fascinated. She is a cat, Olivia corrected. Sometimes. It's complicated. She has strong feelings about the Egyptian art that depicted her as a woman with a cat head. She says the proportions were terrible and very offensive. Professor Dalthier was already taking notes. This is incredible. Primary source interviews with beings who lived through the periods we study. Do you understand what this means for historical accuracy? It means, Dean Porthos said, that we transform this crisis into an opportunity. We become the institution that broke new ground in xenoanthropology. We admit our errors and demonstrate how science corrects itself, and we give the rest of the galaxy something they've never had. The truth about Earth's most fascinating mystery. The other universities will try to catch up, Instructor Morell warned. Let them try, Professor Dalthier said, his earlier despair transforming into determination. They don't have Miss Reed. They don't have her family's trust. We do. We made mistakes, but we can fix them. And in the process, we'll learn more about Earth than we ever imagined possible. Olivia felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had just wanted to correct one inaccurate lecture. Instead, she had triggered an academic revolution that would reshape how the galaxy understood humanity. Ruth was going to love this story. Ambassador Corinth represented 347 species in the Galactic Council, and in her 200 years of diplomatic service, she had never seen the council chamber this packed. Every major government had sent representatives. Scientists crowded the observation galleries. Security had been tripled after someone suggested that beings who could summon lightning might pose a threat. The entire galaxy wanted answers about what Earth had been hiding. Olivia sat in the front row between Dean Porthos and her mother, who had arrived the previous evening with an expression that mixed pride and resignation. Dr. Evelyn Reed wore a formal suit instead of her usual lab coat, and she carried a briefcase that probably contained enough documentation to bury the council in paperwork for months. Nervous, Evelyn whispered to her daughter. Terrified, Olivia admitted. Did we break some kind of galactic law by not mentioning Uncle Thor exists? No idea, her mother said cheerfully. That's why I brought our lawyers. They're very expensive and very good. Professor Dalthier sat behind them with Instructor Morell, both looking like they were attending their own execution. The past 3 weeks had been chaos as the Academy scrambled to address the revelation while managing guest lectures from Olivia's relatives. Aunt Bridget's fire safety demonstration had been spectacular and only slightly terrifying. Uncle Thoth's presentation on the evolution of writing systems had gone 6 hours long, and nobody had complained. Cousin Anansi's storytelling workshop had resulted in 8 students changing their major to narrative studies, but now the real reckoning had come. The Galactic Council wanted explanations, and they wanted them publicly. Ambassador Corinth called the session to order with a gesture that made the chamber's lights dim. We are here to address the matter of Earth's non-disclosure regarding certain individuals with extraordinary capabilities. Dr. Evelyn Reed of Earth will provide testimony. Doctor, please approach. Evelyn stood and walked to the central platform with the confidence of someone who had testified before governments for decades. Her holographic image projected large enough for everyone to see clearly. "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm here to clarify what appears to be a significant misunderstanding between Earth and the galactic community." "Misunderstanding?" called out a representative from the Andromedan Collective. "Your planet has beings who can control weather, manipulate reality, and possess lifespans measured in millennia. You never thought to mention this during first contact protocols?" "We did mention them," Evelyn said calmly. "We provided complete historical and cultural databases when we joined the galactic community 40 years ago. Those databases included information about individuals with unusual capabilities. You classified them as mythology and folklore. We assumed you understood they were real and were being polite about it." The chamber erupted in protest. Ambassador Corinth had to call for order 3 times. "Dr. Reed, are you claiming that Earth's databases clearly indicated these individuals were real?" "Yes," Evelyn said. She pulled up a holographic document. "Here's the cultural database we submitted in 2207. Section 14C covers individuals with extended lifespans and unusual capabilities. We listed 247 people by name along with their abilities, current locations, and contact information. We even included their tax records to prove they were legally registered citizens." A counselor from the Kepler Union stood. "Why would we examine tax records in a mythology database?" "It wasn't a mythology database," Evelyn said patiently. "It was a cultural and historical database. You categorized it as mythology. We categorized it as family records." Another representative spoke up, her translator rendering her words in standard galactic. "But the stories about these beings describe impossible feats. Thunder gods, wisdom incarnate, death personified. How were we supposed to know they were literal? Because we said they were?" Evelyn suggested. "Look, I understand the confusion. If someone told me there were beings on their planet who could summon storms, I'd be skeptical too. But we provided evidence, medical records, DNA analysis, video documentation, historical photographs spanning centuries. At some point, the burden of investigation falls on the reader." Ambassador Corinth studied the documents floating before her. "Dr. Reed, these records do appear to clearly state these individuals are real. Why did your government not protest when we classified them as mythology?" Evelyn shrugged. "Because the people themselves asked us not to. They prefer privacy. When the galactic community decided they were myths, they were relieved. It meant they could live their lives without being treated like exhibits. My uncle specifically said, and I quote, 'If the aliens want to think I'm made up, that's fine. Saves me from having to do interviews.'" "Your uncle," Ambassador Corinth said carefully, "would be Thor Odinson, registered electrician and documented being of Norse origin?" "That's him," Evelyn confirmed. "He's actually watching this session via live stream. He sends his regards and wants everyone to know he's not a security threat. He just wants to wire buildings and occasionally help with storm management during hurricane season." A security officer stood up. "Ambassador, we must address the security implications. These individuals possess abilities that could be weaponized." They represent nothing," Evelyn interrupted sharply. "They're people, citizens. Most of them are older than your civilization, and they've chosen peace. Uncle Thor could have conquered your planet centuries ago if he wanted to. Instead, he fixes power grids and complains about building code violations. Aunt Athena could manipulate entire populations with her abilities. Instead, she teaches military strategy to undergraduates and publishes papers on tactical theory. They're not weapons. They're family members with unusual biology who want normal lives." Olivia watched her mother defend their relatives with fierce pride. This was why Dr. Evelyn Reed had been chosen as Earth's representative. She was brilliant, unflappable, and absolutely done with other people's nonsense. A scientist in the gallery called out, "How many of these beings exist on Earth currently?" Evelyn consulted her notes. "About 400 registered with the International Supernatural Artifacts Commission. Maybe another 100 who prefer not to register. They come from various pantheons and cultural backgrounds. Most are concentrated in their regions of origin, but some travel. They hold jobs, pay taxes, have families. Some have married normal humans. My aunt is married to a dentist from Cleveland. It's very normal and very boring, which is how they like it." Ambassador Corinth leaned forward. "Dr. Reed, I must ask directly. Has Earth been hiding these individuals to maintain a strategic advantage?" "No," Evelyn said firmly. We've been respecting their privacy because they asked us to. There's a difference. If you want to meet them, ask nicely. Several have already volunteered to help the Academy with their research. They're not hidden, they're just private, like any citizen has the right to be. But the capabilities, the security officer persisted. The potential for harm is the same as any advanced technology, Evelyn interrupted again. Should we be concerned that your species has weapons that can destroy planets? Should you be worried that humans invented nuclear bombs? We all have the capacity for harm. These individuals have chosen not to exercise it. Judge them by their actions over millennia, not by your fears. Professor Dalthier stood suddenly. Ambassador, may I speak? When granted permission, he continued. I have spent 3 weeks interviewing several of these individuals. They are exactly as Dr. Reed describes, people with unusual abilities who want ordinary lives. Bridget of Kildare is a firefighter who saves lives daily. Thoth of Egypt preserves human knowledge and makes it freely available. Anansi teaches children the power of stories. They are not threats. They are contributors to society who happen to be extraordinary. They lied about being gods, someone shouted. No, Professor Dalthier corrected. Humans worshipped them and they tried to discourage it. The historical record is clear on this. Most of them found worship uncomfortable. They were powerful beings in a time when power was equated with divinity. They didn't ask for temples. They asked to be left alone. Olivia's datapad buzzed. A message from Uncle Thor. Your professor is good. I like him. Tell him I'll sign all his books. Ambassador Corinth reviewed something on her own display, then looked up. The council will recess to review the evidence. However, I want to address the broader issue. Earth's joining the galactic community was meant to be a bridge between our civilizations. This revelation raises questions about trust. Evelyn's expression softened. Ambassador, I understand. But consider this. We trusted you with the truth from the beginning. You dismissed it. Now that you believe us, you're angry that we didn't insist harder. The failure here wasn't malicious. It was mutual. We assumed you did your research. You assumed we were primitive. Both assumptions were wrong. The question is whether we can move forward together or let this misunderstanding divide us. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Ambassador Corinth nodded. Wisely said, Dr. Reed. The council will reconvene tomorrow. In the meantime, I believe many of us need to reconsider our assumptions about Earth and its people. As the session ended and people filed out, Olivia felt exhausted. Her mother put an arm around her shoulders. You did good bringing this to light. It was going to come out eventually. Better to handle it now than later. Do you think they'll accept it? Olivia asked. Eventually, Evelyn said. People fear what they don't understand. But once they meet your Uncle Thor and realize he's just a guy who likes bad jokes and good mead, they'll calm down. Fear fades when you share a meal with someone. Dean Porthos approached, his energy field pulsing with satisfaction. Dr. Reed, that was masterfully done. You've given us a clear path forward. Good, Evelyn said. Because I have about 6 more relatives who want to help with the Academy's research. Apparently, word got out that you're actually interested in the truth. And they're excited to finally set the record straight about what really happened in all those myths. Professor Dalthier looked like he might cry with joy. Really? Really, Evelyn confirmed. Though fair warning, Uncle Loki wants to do a comedy routine about the time he got pregnant. As a horse. It actually happened, and apparently it's hilarious in the right context. You might want to prepare your students, Olivia groaned. Please no. Too late, her mother said cheerfully. He's already written the material. It's called 8 Legs and 9 Months of Regret. The galaxy was learning the truth about Earth. Olivia, just hoped they were ready for it. 2 years had transformed the Celestial Archive Academy from a place of comfortable assumptions into something far more interesting. Olivia walked through corridors that had once displayed artwork depicting mythological scenes and now showed photographs of real people at family gatherings. The Ancient Earth Studies Department had tripled in size and become the most sought-after program in the galaxy. Students competed ferociously for admission, and the waiting list stretched 5 years long. She passed a classroom where Aunt Bridget was demonstrating fire manipulation to a group of stunned engineering students. The flames danced between her fingers while she explained the molecular theory behind controlling combustion at the quantum level. Next door, Cousin Anansi was teaching narrative structure by weaving a story so compelling, that reality itself seemed to bend slightly to accommodate it. 2 security officers watched from the hallway just in case, but Anansi always kept his demonstrations safe. Professor Dalthier met her outside the main lecture hall, where a crowd had already gathered. In the past 2 years, he had transformed from a broken scholar into something more vibrant. His scales were brighter, his eyes sharper. He had published 3 new books, each one a retraction and expansion of his previous work. The latest, The Living Myths, Earth's Hidden History Revealed, had become required reading at every major university in the galaxy. "Are you ready for this?" he asked Olivia. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said. Today was special. Today marked the official opening of the Pantheon Studies Institute, a joint venture between the Academy and Earth that would serve as the galaxy's center for studying extraordinary beings. And more importantly, today was the day her family held their first official reunion on an alien world. They entered the hall together. The amphitheater had been expanded to accommodate 3 times its previous capacity, and every seat was filled. Students from dozens of species sat next to visiting scholars, government representatives, and curious civilians. At the front of the room, a long table had been set up with chairs for the guest speakers. Olivia took her seat next to Ruth, who bubbled excited greetings in her tank. Liam sat on her other side along with Simon, who had overcome his initial prejudices and become one of Olivia's closest friends. They had formed a study group that regularly met with visiting Earth relatives to ask questions nobody had ever thought to ask before. Dean Porthos materialized at the podium, his energy form projecting calm authority. "Welcome to the dedication ceremony of the Pantheon Studies Institute. 2 years ago, this institution faced a crisis that challenged everything we thought we knew about humanity and its history. Today, we celebrate not just the resolution of that crisis, but the extraordinary opportunity it revealed. I'm honored to introduce our distinguished guests." One by one, they entered. Uncle Thor came first, waving to the crowd like a celebrity. He had become the unofficial mascot of the Institute after his first visit, and students loved him for his willingness to answer any question, no matter how silly. He wore a t-shirt that said, "My niece goes to the academy and all I got was this lousy t-shirt and a prestigious guest lecture position." Aunt Athena followed, every inch the professor in her tailored suit and reading glasses. She had already agreed to teach a semester-long course on strategic thinking and had prepared a syllabus that made experienced military commanders weep with its complexity. Uncle Thoth carried a stack of manuscripts that made several archivists in the audience visibly salivate. He was donating copies to the Institute's library, along with his personal notes on 5,000 years of human history. Cousin Anansi couldn't enter without making it dramatic, appearing in a swirl of silk and laughter that made everyone smile despite themselves. He had already recorded 300 hours of oral histories that were being studied by linguists across the galaxy. Great Aunt Bastet entered in her preferred form, a large black cat who walked with the dignity of royalty. She leapt onto the table and sat, wrapping her tail around her paws, golden eyes surveying the crowd with ancient judgment. Others followed. Bridget with her ever-present flame dancing above one palm, Hermes moving so fast he was briefly just a blur before he settled into his chair. Quetzalcoatl with feathers that shifted colors and patterns that hurt to watch. Amaterasu who seemed to glow from within, making the hall brighter just by being present. And at the end, moving slowly and deliberately, came Baba Yaga. Olivia tensed. Nobody had expected her great-grandmother to come. She preferred her isolation in the forests of Russia, in her house that walked on chicken legs. But here she was, ancient and powerful and terrifying, her eyes holding the weight of centuries. She took her seat and smiled, showing teeth. "I hear there are questions," she said in a voice like winter wind. "I have answers. Some you will like, some you will not, but all will be true." Dean Porthos recovered from his visible shock. "Thank you all for coming. Your willingness to share your experiences and knowledge represents a fundamental shift in how the galaxy understands Earth and humanity." Professor Dalthier will moderate the session. Professor Dalthier approached the table, his datapad ready but his expression showing genuine warmth. "I want to start by thanking each of you. 2 years ago, I believed you were fiction. Now I have the honor of calling several of you colleagues and friends. I think we should begin with the question everyone wants answered. What are you?" Thor leaned back in his chair, making it creak. Honestly? We're not entirely sure ourselves. Best we can figure, we're human. But with our biology tied to fundamental concepts or forces, I'm connected to storms at a level that's more metaphysical than physical. Athena is tied to the concept of wisdom and strategic thinking. Thoth is linked to knowledge and communication. We were born this way or became this way so long ago we don't remember the transition. But why only on Earth? Asked a student from the audience. Why hasn't this phenomenon occurred elsewhere? Athena adjusted her glasses. Who says it hasn't? You've been assuming your own myths are pure fiction too.
Have you actually checked?
Earth isn't special. Earth is just honest about what it has. I'd wager half the species in this room have their own version of us, hiding or forgotten or dismissed as legend. The implications of that statement rippled through the crowd. Whispered conversations started immediately. Thoth raised a hand for quiet. We're not gods. We never were. We're people with unusual capabilities who lived long enough to be remembered. The worship was something humans imposed on us, not something we sought. Most of us found it deeply uncomfortable. I spent 3,000 years trying to convince people I was just a really good librarian. With the head of an ibis, someone called out. That was artistic interpretation, Thoth said dryly. I'm a shapeshifter. Sometimes I prefer bird form for flying. The Egyptians saw me change once and decided to paint me that way forever. Very annoying. Bastet spoke, her voice surprisingly clear for a cat. You fear us because you see power. But power without wisdom is meaningless. We have lived long enough to understand that violence and domination lead only to emptiness. We chose peace not because we are weak, but because we are old enough to know better. Baba Yaga nodded. Young species always think might makes right. Then they live a few thousand years and realize that right makes might. We could have conquered your worlds. Instead, we bake bread and teach children and fix power grids. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. But what about the stories? Professor Dalthier asked. The myths speak of great wars, terrible vengeance, cosmic battles. Were those false? No, Thor said quietly. We were young once. We made mistakes. Some of those mistakes were catastrophic. We learned. That's what living for millennia teaches you. Consequences catch up eventually. The wars happened. The vengeance happened. We're not proud of it. But we grew past it. Anansi leaned forward, his eyes bright with storytelling intensity. Every culture has its dark age. You've all had them. The difference is we lived long enough to have our dark age, our enlightenment, our renaissance, and our age of wisdom. All in one lifetime. The myths you study are our history, yes. But they're ancient history. You wouldn't want to be judged by what your species did 5,000 years ago, would you? A long silence followed. Olivia saw understanding dawn on faces throughout the audience. They had been judging these beings by stories from their youth, not by the people they had become. What do you want from us? Ambassador Corinth asked. She had attended specifically for this event. What does Earth want, having revealed your existence? Nothing, Evelyn Reed said, standing from where she sat in the audience. We want nothing. They want what they've always wanted, to be left alone to live their lives. This institute exists because you asked for it, because you wanted truth. But the truth comes with a responsibility. These are people, not specimens, citizens, not curiosities. They're sharing their knowledge freely. All we ask is that you respect their dignity. And maybe stop writing papers about why we don't exist, Thor added. That was getting old. The laughter that followed broke the tension. Questions flowed for another 3 hours. They discussed biology, history, culture, power, responsibility, and the nature of divinity. The beings at the table answered with honesty and humor, showing themselves to be people with flaws and virtues, not the perfect or terrible figures from myth. As the session ended, students crowded forward, desperate to ask more questions. Olivia watched her relatives handle it with patience and grace. Uncle Thor posed for photos. Aunt Athena discussed curriculum development with eager professors. Cousin Anansi was already surrounded by literature students begging for stories. Professor Dalthier found Olivia in the crowd. You know this changes everything, don't you? Not just for the Academy, but for the entire galaxy. Every species will start investigating their own myths now. We might discover that Earth isn't unique at all. Would that be so bad? Olivia asked. Finding out we're not alone in being not alone? He laughed. No, it would be wonderful. Terrifying and wonderful. Just like everything else we've learned from your family. Ruth bubbled over, her tentacles pressing against the glass of her tank. Olivia, your great-aunt Bastet says I can visit her in Egypt during break. She wants to show me the old temples and tell me what they actually got wrong in the hieroglyphics. That sounds amazing, Olivia said, grinning. Liam and Simon joined them, both looking dazed but happy. Your Uncle Hermes says he can teach me about optimal routing algorithms, Liam said. He's been running a courier service for 3,000 years. The efficiency data alone is worth a thesis. And Anansi is going to help me with my narrative xenopsychology project, Simon added. He says every culture's myths reveal truth, even when they're technically fiction. I never thought about it that way before. Dean Porthos materialized beside them, his energy field pulsing with what Olivia had learned to recognize as contentment. Miss Reed, I wanted to thank you personally. You corrected one inaccurate lecture and changed the course of galactic academia. That's quite an achievement for a student. I just told the truth, Olivia said. Yes, the dean agreed. But the truth delivered at the right moment is the most powerful force in the universe. More powerful than storms or wisdom or even time itself. You taught us that. Across the hall, Olivia's mother caught her eye and smiled. Uncle Thor waved, nearly knocking over a hovering camera drone. Aunt Athena was deep in conversation with 3 military strategists who looked like they were having their worldviews systematically reconstructed. Baba Yaga sat in the corner, somehow managing to look both terrifying and grandmotherly as she told a group of students a story that made their eyes widen with horror and delight. This was her family. Extraordinary and ordinary, ancient and adapting, powerful and peaceful. They had lived in the shadows of myth for millennia, content to let the universe think they were fiction. But now the truth was known, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Olivia's datapad buzzed. A message from her mother. Should we tell them about the dragons? She smiled and typed back. Let's save that for my dissertation. Some revelations, after all, were worth waiting for.